Hello friends, welcome to Mysterious Stories. Today, we bring to you the heartbreaking story of an Indian family living in a small village called Dingcha in the Indian state of Gujarat. The family consisted of Jagdish Patel, his wife Vaishali, their son Dharmik and their little daughter Vihan. Jagdish, like many others in his village, lived in a modest home with his parents. What makes this story tragic is how their desire for a better life led them into a deadly situation. Many people from this village had already moved to America in search of prosperity. The stories of those who made it were often glamorous. The people who went to the United States earned more dollars, returned to the village, built a luxurious house, and further fascinated the dream of moving to the United States for the remaining people. It was not just Jagdish. Many villagers were driven by the same dream of building a new life abroad, achieving economic stability, and providing better opportunities to children. Jagdish, too, was obsessed with going to America, and the more he saw people from his village who had succeeded abroad and returned home, the more determined he became to make this dream come true for his family. He discussed his ambitions with his parents, who were initially hesitant but eventually agreed. But obtaining a US visa is notoriously difficult and expensive, especially for an average family like Jagdish's. Then Jagdish came up with a different plan. Instead of applying for a US visa, he decided that his family would first go to Canada. Although tensions between Canada and India were high at the time, obtaining a Canadian visa was still relatively easier than getting one for the US. However, Jagdish's real plan was not to stay in Canada. His ultimate goal was to illegally cross the US border. The idea wasn't unique. He was inspired by a network of smugglers operating in India and posing as visa consultants. These so-called visa consultants were actually smugglers. They made false promises to people desperate to get to countries like the United States and Canada. These smugglers convinced Jagdish that the easiest way to achieve his dream was to obtain a Canadian tourist visa and use it to illegally cross the Canada-US border. Jagdish took their advice and applied for a tourist visa, which he successfully obtained. By January 12, 2022, Jagdish, Vaishali, Dharmik and Vihan boarded a flight to Canada. As their stay in Canada was not planned for long, they had minimal luggage when they arrived in Toronto. Smugglers' network was well organized, and when Jagdish and his family arrived, he was one of the group members and took him from the airport. Jagdish has already paid a large amount of money to the smugglers for services, which would help him to safely reach the United States. The family spent several days in Canada, during which time the smugglers provided them with food and shelter. The plan was clear. Jagdish and his family would spend only 6 days in Canada before attempting to cross the US border illegally. On the morning of January 18, 2022, they traveled to the province of Manitoba, where they were taken to the small town of Emerson, located near the US border. The area experiences extreme cold and heavy snowfall, especially in the winter. Canada is generally known in cold winter, but a place like Emerson is one of the coldest places in the world during this period. Emerson is a small town with a population of only 700. Even residents who are accustomed to the cold find it difficult to survive the harsh winter, and the weather conditions were particularly harsh on the day Jagdish crossed the border. Snowstorms covered the area, and the temperature rose to 35 degrees Celsius. The view was close to zero, and it was almost impossible to see a few feet. But despite the danger, Jagdish and his family set out on foot with 7 others to cross the border at night. The plan was to cross into the US state of North Dakota, which borders Canada, near Emerson. However, the freezing conditions made the trek incredibly perilous. The wind was howling, snow was blowing everywhere, and the cold was unbearable. Unfortunately, the storm proved too strong for Jagdish, Vaishali and their young children, who became disoriented and struggled to keep moving in the extreme cold. The next day, when the storm had passed, their bodies were found frozen under a thick layer of snow, just meters from the US border. The bodies of the family Jagdish, Vaishali, Dharmik, 11, and Vihan, 3, were discovered by Canadian police on patrol near the Bird River. The scene was gruesome. Families died trying to achieve what they believed would be a better life in America. Their dreams of prosperity turned into a nightmare. After the remains were discovered, Canadian authorities launched an investigation and traced the family's movements since their arrival in Canada. It soon became clear that they were part of an organized human trafficking operation. The smugglers responsible for this tragic journey had taken money from Jagdish but provided him with few resources or provisions for the deadly winter conditions. Canadian police have worked in close collaboration with the Indian authorities since the smuggling of action from India. During the year, Ahmedabad Indian City Police arrested several key members of the operation, including 3 smugglers, Jagdish Patel, Bhavesh Patel and Darsh Chaudhary. These people had long been advising people on illegal methods of crossing international borders. They arranged everything from visas to travel plans, all for a high fee. Meanwhile, in Canada, the 2 smugglers who guided Jagdish's family across the border have been identified as Bittu Paji and Fanal Patel. The men were aware of the dangerous weather conditions but sent the family into the storm anyway, hoping the extreme weather conditions would help them avoid detection by authorities. They did not even provide the Jagdish family with appropriate winter clothes and equipment for survival. It was an intentional negligence, which led to the death of the family. One of the other migrants in the group, a young man named Voshal Dobi, managed to survive by turning back in the snowstorm. He was one of the few who saw the dangerous conditions and decided to return. He then shared his story with Indian police, detailing the entire smuggling operation and admitting that it was Fanal Patel who had picked him up at the Canadian airport. Vashal, like Jagdish's family, was traveling on a Canadian tourist visa and was due to cross the border that night. Fortunately for him, he made the decision to return, which saved his life. Canadian authorities have been working hard to build a case against the smugglers involved, but gathering sufficient evidence has proven difficult. The smugglers have acted with great caution, making them difficult to track, and despite our best efforts, it seems likely that Jagdish, his wife and their 2 young children will never return. Their tragic story is a brutal reminder of the risks people are willing to take in the pursuit of a better life.